Hi, everybody. It's Ricki Heller from rickiheller.com. I help people on restricted diets learn to love their food again so they can focus on healing their bodies and get back to their best health and their best lives. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I see happening a lot in the world of anti-candida, but isn't discussed all that much. And it's what I call the candida diet cycle. So let me know if this is you. Maybe you were diagnosed with candida, or you were told that it was a condition that was going along with some other condition that you had, maybe Lyme disease or something like that. But you knew you had to go on an anti-candida diet, and you went on the diet, and you thought about this as something that's temporary, that you work with until you feel better, and then you can go back to just living your normal life, sort of like the way you would take antibiotics for a few weeks and then go back to what you were doing before. And maybe that worked, and maybe you felt better, and then you went along for a while, you're feeling okay, and then you had a relapse. You went either back to eating all those old foods you did before, or some of those old foods that you did before, and suddenly you didn't feel good anymore, and you realized candida was back. So you had to pull in the reins and had to get serious again, and you went right back on that diet. Except maybe this time it took a little longer to feel better, and it was a little more difficult to clear the candida before you felt okay again. And maybe this time you didn't feel quite as good as you did last time, but you felt good enough. So you went on with life, you went back to living your life. And then maybe a few months, maybe a few years go by, and you realize that once again you were having a relapse, and so you had to go back on the anti-candida diet again, and this time it took even longer, and you felt even worse, and it was harder to clear the candida again, and you find yourself going through this cycle over and over. It could be once or twice, it could be 10 times. In my case, some of you know, I did this 3 times, and I got worse and worse and worse, and realized that the only thing that was going to help ultimately was to really stick to that program, stick to that diet for the long term until it was clear. And in my case, ultimately forever. So, or at least for the rest of my life. And so that's really the only way to transform your health permanently. And so for many of you, you know that if you go back to those old habits and start eating those foods that made you sick in the first place, well, that's just going to bring back all those symptoms or worse. And this becomes kind of like a treadmill for people where they feel they just can't stop that cycle because it's just too hard to stick with the diet. And so they want to make the change permanent, but they just find it really, really difficult or downright impossible. And so here's what I've discovered about this over time, is that it's not just a simple switch. I mean, as you know, it's relatively easy, or at least we can sort of force ourselves to commit to something difficult for the short term. But then when we begin to understand that this has to be something long term, and that we may not be able to go back to eating the way we did before, that's when it starts to feel really onerous and really awful, and like it's simply impossible to do it. And that's where a very fundamental switch needs to take place. So what I would like to see for people, and what I discovered was the way to truly embrace this diet and happily live this way, was to stop looking at an anti-candida diet as something that's punishing, something that you do temporarily until you're back to normal, but that the living this way, eating healthfully, whether it's an anti-candida diet or some variation thereof, whatever would apply to your own condition, to do that as a permanent switch. So we become somebody who isn't on an anti-candida diet, we become somebody who lives an anti-candida lifestyle. And there's a small but very significant difference in identifying with the first or the second. And I have found it's that switch in the way that we think, it's that switch in the way that we behave that makes all the difference. And that's actually the fundamental basis as to why I created the Reclaim program, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes. But this is the distinction we need to make. So let me see if I can explain it a little bit more clearly in terms of what needs to happen. Because for most of us, it really requires a fundamental change in the way we look at ourselves, in the way we look at what we eat, and the way we're living our lives. And it's not as tough as you think it might be. So if we look at it at a deeper level, here's one example. For those of you who know the psychology behind it, this is called cognitive dissonance. And I think we need to make cognitive dissonance our friend. So in terms of cognitive dissonance, all that really means is that there's a conflict between how we think of ourselves, or what we think of ourselves in terms of our sort of subconscious identity, and our behaviors. So they're not in alignment with each other. So as an example, if you consider yourself as a really honest person and a good person, which most of us do, but you find yourself in a lot of positions where you're lying to people, then there's going to be a cognitive dissonance between your identity as someone who's honest and your actual behavior as someone who's lying. And ultimately, one of those is going to assert its power and become the new identity, because they have to be in alignment. The way we think of ourselves and the way we actually act in the world, if they're out of alignment, there's going to be a source of conflict, and we are not going to feel good about ourselves until that comes back into alignment. So it might mean you stop lying, and then you can truthfully think of yourself as an honest person. But for some people, it might mean that they begin to change the way they think of themselves, and they start to think of themselves as a dishonest person. And then everything that goes along with being dishonest may start to come into the picture as well. You know, do they steal? Do they commit other acts that are not honest or honorable? So that can work in every phase of your life. I'll give you another example. I have a good friend who had been smoking for many years, and she decided she wanted to quit. Now, what's interesting in her situation is she never really embraced the life of a smoker. She felt in her own head that she wasn't a smoker. So even though it was kind of difficult initially, she realized after a while that she just didn't identify with the whole persona of a smoker. And that may be a stereotype, but what we think of in our society as someone who smokes, someone who's addicted to nicotine, that's obviously true. But she thought of, this means that your clothes are always smelly and smelling of cigarette smoke. And it means that you have a car that's full of ashes and it's dirty, and your house has this lingering smell of smoke. And you're one of these people who has to go huddle outside at work at lunch hour just to have a cigarette. And so she realized that that wasn't who she identified with. And once she embraced her identity as a non-smoker, it was easy. Smoking just didn't have that appeal. And so I think that's exactly what happened to me the last time I was diagnosed with Candida. I realized I no longer want to be someone who is ruled by unhealthy food. And the process of making this switch is something that took some time. And obviously that's what I have been working on and clarifying over the years. But once I embrace that identity, I can tell you now that I am no longer someone who identifies with eating those kinds of unhealthy foods. And so because of that, they have no power over me. Now, I'm making this sound really easy, but there's a fundamental switch that has to happen at a very deep level. And after all these years of working on this, this is where my program Reclaim comes into play, because it's through this program that I'm going to share with you the ways that you can truly make that change at the deepest level, so that you no longer are that same person who is drawn by those sweets, or drawn by that glass of wine, or whatever it may be. Because until we truly embrace that new identity, we're going to keep falling off the wagon over and over again. And that is not the future I want for you. So I can tell you, as someone who's been there, absolutely, I don't care how much you think you're a sugar addict. I don't care how much you feel that peer pressure going out with your friends is going to change you. I don't care how much those Doritos or those tacos or that pizza or that ice cream or whatever it might be. I don't care how irresistible it feels to you right now. You're looking at somebody whose typical day might have been waking up to 3 slices of chocolate layer cake for breakfast, and then having some cigarettes in the middle of the day, having wine with dinner every night, eating Betty Crocker frosting out of the can as a snack, just basically garbage food, sweet food, garbage food, sweet food all day long. And I am literally, I can say totally honestly, I am no longer tempted by any of those things. They just don't have that pull for me anymore because that's not who I am. It's like if I said to you, I want you to shoot heroin this afternoon. It's just not part of who you are for most of you watching. And so if that's the case, it's not appealing. You should go rob a bank this afternoon. It isn't part of your mindset. It isn't part of your identity. It's just not going to happen. And that's the kind of change you can make and you need to make if you want to keep eating healthfully for the rest of your life. So if this sounds like you and you are ready to make this change, I would love for you to join us in the next Reclaim group, which begins in August 2018. Because this is such an intensive program, we've got a 6-month program and it's only accepting 10 people. We have 3 signed up already, so only 7 spots left. And because of the intensive and personalized nature of this group, you really need to be someone who is committed, absolutely committed to the process. And I need to be sure that our group is going to mesh. So because of that, I'm asking people to apply personally. We're going to hop on the phone for a quick call and we can talk about your situation and why you want to be in the group. And I, of course, will answer any questions you have about the group. And at the end of our call, I will tell you 100% honestly whether I think it's a good match for you or not. And if not, I'll let you know. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste our time in the group. And if I can, I'll recommend something different for you. But if it is a match for you, then fabulous. I'd love for you to join us, this group. And I can tell you more details when we speak. But as I said, it's going to be intensive and personalized, live group meetings, exercises. And by the end of our 6 months together, you will be a different person if you do the work and you're committed to the process. But that's the key. I only want to speak to people who are absolutely committed to change. You might have heard that old joke about the light bulb. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one. But the light bulb really needs to want to change. And as someone who's been in therapy most of my adult life, I find that hilarious. But this is the truth. If you are not ready to make a change and you're not committed to saying, I want my life, I want my health, I want my eating habits to be different. You don't have to know how you're going to get to the end point. You don't even have to know how you're going to get to the next point. You just have to know in your guts, in your bones, that yes, it is time for me to change and I'm ready. And if that's you, I want to hear from you. So please do click on the link. It's either going to be above or below this video and sign up for a call where we can talk about what it is that you're going through and your situation and whether or not Reclaim would be a good fit for you. I would love to speak to you. I would love to see you there with us because this 6-month program is going to be life-changing. All right, great. I hope that helped. I hope that that concept is something that can help you in any case in terms of literally shifting the way we see ourselves as a stepping stone to changing our habits. And if you think this information would be beneficial to someone else that you know, please do tell them about this video or let them know about Reclaim and they can hop on a call with me as well. Applications close August 1st, 2018, and it won't open again until 2019. So if this is something that calls to you, I want to hear from you. Don't hesitate. Those 7 spots are going to go fast. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye.